Welcome to the presentation of Musical Experiences of Missouri's Latinx Communities. I'm Veronica Perez Picasso, Cambio de Colores co-director and chair of the Latinx Communities in Missouri's committee. This is a collaboration between the Cambio Center and the Missouri 2021 Bicentennial's Latinx Communities in Missouri Committee. This event is the first of a series highlighting the contributions and importance of our Latinx communities in the state of Missouri. In this first event, we will hear performances by Kansas City Latin Jazz Orchestra, followed by a conversation with Pablo Sanhueza and Cynthia Ammerman. We thank the support of our generous sponsors for this event, the Missouri Arts Council, the MU Cambio Center, the MU Museum of Art and Archaeology, the National Endowment for the Arts, UMKC Institute for Human Development, Alianzas, and LCIM's official sponsor, LIUNA's Missouri and Kansas Laborers District Council. We will end the conversation with a brief Q&A. You can submit your questions at any time through the Q&A. To begin today's event, please help me welcome Marc Rice, musicologist of Truman State University, who will moderate today's discussion. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Veronica. It's my very delight to welcome Pablo Sanhueza and Cynthia Ammerman to our discussion. Pablo Sanhueza has been deemed Kansas City's Heart and Soul of Latin Music by JAM Magazine and recognized as the city's premier salsa and Latin jazz percussionist and band leader. Since his arrival to Kansas City from Santiago, Chile in 1996, Pablo has dedicated the past 20 years of his distinguished career to the music of the Latin American experience as a percussionist, a band leader, and educator who has worked with 3 generations of musicians. In 2018, Sanhueza co-founded the Kansas City Latin Jazz Orchestra. The KCLJO is the first performance and education nonprofit in the Midwestern United States dedicated to salsa and Latin jazz. Representing Latino leadership in the arts, Pablo is a Missouri Arts Council touring artist and a Missouri Humanities Council Speakers Bureau member. In 2019, Sanhueza welcomed Pedrito Martinez to Kansas City for the historic Folly Jazz Series and Artist Talk. Sanhueza and KCLJO are endorsed by the Herbie Hancock Institute of Jazz for Cultural and Education Outreach in Chile and the Midwestern United States. Sanhueza is a master artist for the Missouri Traditional Arts Apprenticeship Program. Cynthia Ammerman is executive director of the Kansas City Latin Jazz Orchestra and Nevada Preservation Foundation, Las Vegas, as well as principal of Polly's Cultural Planning. Throughout her career, she has developed a unique skill set related to the built environment, the arts and the humanities, including pacemaking, cultural policy, advocacy, and historic preservation. Ms. Ammerman has written and extensively documented the history of Kansas City synagogues and the cultural and political landscape of jazz heritage and immigration in the Midwest and Southwest. In addition to regional studies, she has authored National Register of Historic Places nominations, presented in Berlin, Germany, Warsaw, Poland, and Santiago, Chile, and collaborated with several Department of State cultural diplomacy initiatives.
Poogie? I don't know what happened.
You're
Hmm?
You're muted.
Muted?
Oh, no, you're on now.
You're not muted. We can hear you fine, Pablo.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. I can only hear you, Tish. I cannot hear you, the rest of you. So if Cynthia can help me here, I cannot hear anybody.
Okay, Pablo, we can hear you fine. Do you think you could introduce this first video for us and tell us what we're going to see?
Okay, thank you so much. The first video that we're going to see is the Kansas City Latin Jazz Orchestra interpreting a composition by Dizzy Gillespie and Chano Pozo entitled Tintindeo. In this composition, we use a rhythm called Afro. It's one of the earliest forms of Afro-Cuban dance accompaniment for percussion, for conga drums, tumbadora, bongo, and chequere, piano, bass, and horns. And in this piece, Tintindeo is one of the earliest fusion of Afro-Cuban music and jazz. The main melody of the tune is an old lullaby, like a folk song, and in the bridge we introduce rhythm changes, which is what makes jazz the distinctive sound of jazz. So in this composition you have both words, and rhythmically we walk from a Afro into a mambo. So we combine also those elements. So enjoy.
One, 2, 3, 4.
That was, yeah, Tintindeo. Do you want me to say, I can tell more about the song or what we did, or I can receive questions. I can answer any questions you may have. I cannot hear anybody.
I think, Pablo, let's progress to the next two videos, and then we'll do questions after the other two videos have gone.
Oh, you want me to talk about the next one now?
Yeah.
Okay. The next composition is called Cumbia Caletera. It's like cumbia of the harbor, and it's by Julio Diaz, who's from Peru. He's still alive. He's a senior composer, and it was a composition popularized by one of the most famous Venezuelan orchestras, Billo and the Caracas Boys. And Billo is Dominican, who did his career in Venezuela. So it's music that combines the Caribe, South America, and Cumbia Caletera.
Oh, Pablo, that was great, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was cumbia. Thank you so much. An interpretation of cumbia. Cumbia music that comes from Colombia and travels all throughout Latin America, Mexico, and now the world. It's a world phenomenon with electronic and such. The next song is...
Pablo, before we do the next song, let's break it up a little bit and let's do like a question between you and me for the audience. So I'm a musicologist. So I work with African-American music in Kansas City and its connection with the community. And the music I work on and the music that you work on, they have such commonalities. There's the emphasis on rhythm and communication. There's the emphasis on making music in community. And I wondered if you could talk to us about the history and the origins of your orchestra, what its objectives are, how it came to be, and what its relationship and role in Kansas City's Latinx community is.
The orchestra is the result of 2 decades of work with the community in Kansas City in an effort to foster and uphold Latin American cultural arts. The musical traditions, Kansas City, for many years, it's been a city that welcomes live music. Live music is part of the fabric of the city. For the most, blues, I would say, country, blues are the strength, but also there is, as we know, the tradition, the historical ties to jazz through, for the Kansas City swing is part of this tree that we understand as African-American music. So on those pre-existing conditions, I would say we come in as part of a larger immigration from the Caribbean and South America. Kansas City had a strong Mexican presence for at least 100 years, 150 years by now. But in the 90s, there was a huge wave of South Americans and Caribbeans to Kansas City. And that added another element to what was known as Latino or Hispanic at the time. At the time, the term Hispanic was pushed by the mainstream, but it's a term that didn't catch with the Latino community, especially with this new influx of South Americans and Caribbeans didn't accept this term Hispanic. No, not by refusing it, but by enforcing Latino, and that's my generation, and it was very interesting, because in the 90s, this large immigration of people from South America and the Caribbean altered also how Latin American culture looked, sounded, or even tasted, other foods too, however, the entirety of the Latin American experience can relate to all this music that we are presenting, because Mexico has been the amplifier of Latin American culture to the world. Mexico is like the New York is to the United States what Mexico is to Latin America. It's like the largest movie industry, film and record industries are in Mexico to this day for the Latin American world. So yeah. So of course, all the people of the Mexican immigrants were already acquainted with this music as well, part of it, like a lot of Cuban exiles go to Mexico, Pérez Prado and the mambo era, cumbia is, well. So in this context, we had an opportunity to develop what is known today as salsa music. We needed a folk band wouldn't cut it anymore in certain situations. Like an acoustic band with guitars and a little and head percussion would work for a house reunion and the like. But no longer when there are thousands of new residents coming in, and also you have the locals acquainted with this music. So we have to basically go electric at a moment, plug in, and bring in the brass, bring in the trombones, the electric piano, the electric bass, the timbales, the congas, the bongo, trumpet, saxes, and that's the moment in which the music needs a presence in the mainstream of the city. In Kansas City, that is Westport, downtown. That would be the mainstream where everybody goes, and the music earned a spot in these mainstream spaces in the city. So since the 90s, we have been presenting the music on the regular on what we call the mainstream. I mean, the main areas where all the Kansas Cityans go. We have performed in the Plaza, Westport, downtown, East Side, the Jazz District, all the theaters, Foley Theater. No, we have performed Foley. We have performed all the festivals. We haven't had much presence in the theaters or the mainstream events, but yes, in the mainstream public places, and that's how the band takes off. Now we become officially the Kansas City Latin Jazz Orchestra in 2018 because of the necessity for us to provide ourselves and a platform to exist, because the access to these mainstream spaces is limited. We would like to be part of more mainstream events. There are levels of mainstream, right? And since it has been difficult, we decided to create our own events. So we started creating our own street events. We created our own street in West 39th Street, which is one of the last locally run business strips in Kansas City. And we do a street festival there that we produce with ourselves, other than the approval of the business owners. So we have generated a fan base, a support base that is based on doing our work on this continuity of work that is generated by the continuity. And the music now is totally mainstream. You can go to a place and take a salsa dance lesson that might have very little to do with the Latino community. It can be a Polish dance teacher, visiting, and the audience in a bar, something that is not directly linked to the Latino community, but just to Latino culture. So that's another element too that exists parallel to us, to what we do. We remain more connected to the community because of we exist in it. I mean, it's impossible for me to not to be a Latino immigrant anymore, So that's how we remain linked. But also the salsa culture is taken on its own too. It exists on its own commercial world as well. And we decided to go an educational, cultural arts advocacy route instead.
All right. I hear so many similarities between Latinx jazz in Kansas City and Black jazz in Kansas City. This idea of coming and arriving and bringing your own music, adapting it for a larger audience, and making that known that this is who we are in this part of the community. I have another question. I've been getting questions in the Q&A, and this kind of question goes with my own question. Talk to us about the individual members that you work with in the band. Do they come in knowing this music? Are there elements that you have to teach them? Are they all proficient in Latinx jazz, or is this sort of like a teaching, cultural teaching moment that you have?
That is a great question, because throughout the years when we first started, there was very few people who were familiar with this music, and then musicians for many multiple reasons, they have to move on into different. I mean, the turnout in bands is usually, if you can have guys in your orchestra for 2 years, you're doing well, you know? If you have, so the continued necessity of training musicians, and this was their conditions, because we didn't have people who were familiar with the music, but we needed people who had musical training, at least in the horns and piano and bass. The percussion is a completely different world. That was the biggest obstacle to start, because it's an oral tradition that has to do with, you know, it's not a Western instrument, you know, it has its own ethos. So, but once we resolved that problem, kind of, the main issue was to work with the horn section, piano and bass, right? So none of these guys were familiar with salsa music, but most of them were familiar with jazz. And through that, they were kind of familiar with some form of Latin jazz, but not with hardline, with the traditional way to play, like Afro-Cuban salsa, like with the way that is done for Latino audiences, you know? So after so many years of continually training the musicians that we need to train our own workforce, you know? We figured that we were a de facto educational organization.
Okay.
That's what we were doing on regular basis, but we were not calling it that. We were not presenting us as that. And we decided to do so, to see, well, it's almost like coming to know yourself better. You know, we realized that that's what we were. We were an educational institution and a professional orchestra as well. So we decided to concrete and solidify that model and write a curriculum, establish a pedagogy, design a pedagogy, an ethos, an artistic ethos around it, and continue based on our actual experience working with the people. This is not theory. This is hands-on, based on the fact that we had people from different walks of life all the time. So then you have in a band all three generations, different cultural upbringing, different national origins. So all of this experience gave us most of what we needed to know on how to operate as an effective educational institution. And we are the only tuition-free Latin jazz institute in the United States. It's the only way. It's the only way, a place you can come and learn for tuition-free about Latin jazz. And so
yeah,
that's. Mm-hmm.
That's like really, really awesome. You've referred to your band as an institutional organization, educational organization. You're educating musicians. Do you feel that you are also educating the greater audience of Kansas City? People would go who have never heard this music before, and they come away with a greater understanding of both the music and Latinx culture. Do you think that is happening?
That is also an unexpected outcome of this, because first the music was basically to play for Latino events for the necessity. Then the events got bigger, the audiences grew, and then it became both. We are outreaching to new audiences. We have those comments every time we play. We've been playing 25 years, and we still have people who have to ask, I didn't know that this music existed in Kansas City, you know? Like, I went to vacations to Puerto Rico a couple years ago, and we had such a great time, and I never knew that you guys, or I went to Venezuela or Peru or whoever, and we have those comments. And that also is evidence that it's an underground although solidified and established, is still an underground reality for us. That the people is not something that is being upheld yet, or seen for what it can be as far as an attractive and as tourism. We have people from we used to play in Westport every Saturday for 10 years, every Saturday. So that was an opportunity for us to really show to everybody what we got. People was driving every weekend from Iowa, Nebraska, staying in an hotel in Kansas City because they didn't have an orchestra there. And now they do now. Now there are more Latinos. Now they have orchestras there. So we come so far back, and yes, cultivating audiences is one of the main tasks in cultural arts, because we don't have the means to push propaganda on mass media to get people to see us. So we need to cultivate audiences by hand, word of mouth.
All right, excellent. I want to segue back to your final video with a couple of musical questions. We've had a couple of questions from the audience regarding the instruments in the ensemble. Are these traditional instruments? Have you had to modify them? Have you had to teach the musicians how to play them differently?
The percussion that we use is a workshop that I've been hosting for many years. And the players that we bring in the band are those guys who are more into the music, more committed, and they really want to do it. So it has been a process of presenting this music to young musicians who are very talented, who have the energy, who have the desire to study. Most of them have musical training and musical experience in American music, from jazz to hip hop, you know, and classical music, some of them, you know. But in the percussion, in the rhythms, in the percussion section, we're using Afro-Cuban instruments. We're using a broken down drum set. The Afro-Cuban instruments are the tumbadoras, the congas, the bongo, the timbal that I use. I also use a tambora from Colombia. Is a traditional drum they use for cumbia. Also, the bongocero, the percussionist one of the guys sitting down is using a guira, which is a metal scraper that is originally from Dominican Republic, but is used is a crossover instrument that using cumbia. The cumbia musicians are going to use it a lot instead of the big maracon, because you can control more of the sound. Everything else. So we are combining their Caribbean and South American instruments. We also use other instruments from the Afro-Caribbean and South American diaspora, not in these particular tools, but we can continue adding on repertory. And those are traditional instruments. They're not being modified. Afro-Cuban instruments are made in the United States now, and we are sponsored by a company who makes them here. So, it's a, you know, basically are copies of Afro-Cuban instruments made in the US by American manufacturers. Okay. But I have other instruments that come from Latin America that we have brought here by hand. I mean, when we travel too.
All right. I want to give you a question. I'll let you introduce your final video. When I listen to these three videos, and especially when my wife, Laura, who's from Venezuela, listens to them, we hear music and elements from different places throughout Latin America. This part is Puerto Rican, this part is Dominican. I wonder if you could talk about how you synthesize different elements in your music, and then also set up what the final video that we're about to hear.
One of the main guidances is the study the traditional rhythms that we're trying to use. When we are playing cumbia, cumbia has so many incarnations. Cumbia is from Colombia, but as the music travels through Latin America, it adapts characteristics of the country where it's at. For example, in Peru, is played with electric guitars instead of horns. So the horn lines are played in electric guitars. So that changes the whole dynamic, and with effects, for example, you know, and or in Argentina and Chile is with electric guitars and keyboards, you know, using the horn lines because of the financial restrictions, because horns are so expensive. It's really that's the reason why guitars are more popular in Latin America, in South America than brass instruments. So I retain the brass sound. That's where I divert from the other interpretations of cumbia. I will retain the old traditional brass horn section, but we also do a deeper research on the folkloric rhythms using cumbia, because if you hear some of the recordings, the rhythms get watered down when they enter the music industry. We went the opposite direction with the rhythms. We started using the full rhythm conversations, more open, instead of just a backbeat, you know? Because in American music, the drum machine, it began to pa, to pa, to pa. And that's a simplification of a rhythm that is much more complex, that comes from jazz, and it's still, you know? So all the ornamentation, we bring it back into the music. We didn't leave, we put all the fullness, all the folkloric rhythms, and adapt them to the Latin jazz, Latin percussion section, which is congas, bongo, timbale, and we bring extra drums. So adapted to a Latin jazz, Afro-Cuban jazz, Latin jazz ensemble. That's what we do.
All right, let's hear your third video. What are we about to hear? What is
this last song is called El Cartero. It's by a Venezuelan Colombian composer. Is the Pastor Lopez. You know, it's Colombian and Venezuelan because those are one of the main centers of the music. And it's called El Cartero, and it's a cumbia, and we mix it with salsa, which is contemporary mambo and son.
Ritmo.
Man, that just grew so hard. Those are some great players. Wow. Cynthia, I want to ask you a question. Can we bring you in?
Hello,
All right.
yes, I was moderating some of the Q&A in the chat here.
All right. Oh, hey, Cynthia, let's you and me talk for a second as historians. So the African-American and the Latinx experiences in Kansas City share some similarities. Both groups were immigrants and both groups created their own community and experiences within a white power structure. So what role did music serve in shaping and defining the Latinx community in Kansas City?
In shaping it, well, we have to think also of the geography of the communities, because they're in Kansas City, they didn't necessarily share geography, and through different ways, you know, segregation impacted the communities differently on both sides of the state line. But as we move into kind of like the post-war World War II era, you know, I think that identity is still, so with the African-American community, music is rooted heavily toward the church, and the community is rooted in church and the religious ceremony. And I would say that the music experience is more in the Latino heritage, and Pablo can help me, can verify and probably answer better than I can, but it is rooted to that cultural arts and community expression in a different way. So, you know, both ways of keeping community cohesion.
Okay, excellent. And I want to ask you, both of you, to talk about this question. So jazz is discovered, African-American jazz is discovered among whites in Kansas City. And I'm wondering how the Latinx community discovered jazz. How did they connect with it? How did they find it? And did that change the perception or the relationships between the whites and the Latinx community in Kansas City? And does it continue to evolve to this day?
Well, I'm going to jump in just kind of because there's some parallel timelines that aren't necessarily that through our work and you know, understanding this history here in Kansas City and the Midwest, you have, again, during the quote unquote jazz era that we're associated, we typically think of, they have, again, the segregated clubs, the segregated ballrooms, but also during this same period, you see South American band leaders coming from bigger cities to play in the hotels in Kansas City. And so, but those bands, the African-American band leaders wouldn't be able to play in those presentations. So that's some of like there's parallel timelines. But Pablo, you know, I think that's more of a recent past as far as it goes with jazz and the Latino community, and you know, Pablo's rooted in that, so he has the firsthand account.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I have a little bit of a different way to look at it, because New Orleans is way more connected, or at the time that jazz developed, New Orleans was more connected to the Caribbean than to what we know today as the Northern United States. So since New Orleans was more connected to the Caribbean, I think we trace a common origin to what we call Latin music and jazz, which is in the basin out of the slave trade system. Now, Brazil and the Caribbean, that's the major influx of the slave trade system. And those are and from Brazil, the spread of African descent people in South America and the Caribbean has big part of what this music became. So I would like to think that jazz and Latin American music are cousins, and the grandmother of these cousins is Africa.
Right.
So we're always being connected because of the fact that it's music that are related from the beginning. So it may be what we call jazz is the North American manifestation of this transatlantic Afro music, Afro world music, because it received the influence of the Arab world, of the European world. Of course, we're playing pianos and double basses, you know. You know what I mean? Yeah, trumpets and trombones, you know. So that's it becomes, I think that I would like to look at jazz as one of the first world musics, as well as Latin American, what we call today Latin jazz. So I think that they've been connected forever. And the more that we understand now the history, the more that we can see it. And that's why the music can communicate so easily, because it has that ancestor in common, and the ancestry pulls in. And we're part of that continuum now, because the more we discover the directions of dance music, you know, and how the music proves to be timeless. See, we're still working with elements that have been part of the culture for hundreds of years. The clave rhythms, the compound meters, you know, compound meters, as opposed to simple meters, you know, like, and so that's what we're doing. And I see a total correlation is music that is not separated from each other.
Excellent. We have time for one final question. I want to integrate a question from the audience with something I'm thinking. Talk to us about the future of your band and the future of the Latinx population in Kansas City. The question specifically from the audience is, she was wondering if there's an opportunity to engage young people, like some schools already have jazz bands, and she's thinking ahead to how the Kansas City Latinx population is going to grow in the coming years. How will you grow?
Precisely the fact that we decided to name ourselves the Kansas City Latin Jazz Orchestra and take on that responsibility of catering to the entire city of Kansas City, is precisely to address the presence of the Latino community and the needs for the Latino, all ages, especially the youth, to be exposed to this music and to have a decision where they want to be part or not. So then it's not like what didn't anybody tell me about this, right? It's like, because it happens, you know. Like, for example, one of our musicians who worked with us for many years and was in the conservatory, graduated with a master's, he was like, I cannot believe that this was never brought up, never in my music training, ever since middle school, high school, undergrad, grad school, and this was never presented to me in any convincing or solid manner, because this is not something that you can just speak about it in the light. I mean, it literally, we can present a clinic just to make you aware of it, but the step from not knowing from there to playing the music is going to be a long, and that's what we have developed, a pedagogy that is based on motivating the students to take this 1,000-mile trip, take the first step in this 1,000 miles trip, you know? So definitely, absolutely, we are totally concerned, especially with the dropout percentages growing in the educational system from the Latino and Black community. We're very concerned about our youth not having access to music education, and music education that has cultural competence by people who's actually out here doing this work and has been doing this work, because there's so many nuances. I really don't know, support music education that is telling these kids that being in a talent show on TV is an achievement, you know, to be in a popularity contest is an achievement. The opposite, you know, generate opportunities on the ground to perform. You know, there is people who want to be international before they're local, you know, and that is a huge problem for our youth to aspire to be internationals or national TV stars before they have any local impact, before they have any impact in the neighborhood, you know, in the community. And what we present to them is to think about that, you know, how important is be the one that started the neighborhood band, whatever that is, salsa, hip hop, you know, rap, I mean, anything, reggaeton, the new music that is going to come now, you know. But we want to encourage people to take territorial, to be in the spaces that where they live, instead of aspiring to be, you know. And that's one of the main obstacles we have, you know. We have met a lot of talented people who could be working with us, but they are pursuing a fantasy of fame by taking part of this popularity context. Like, I don't know that they're called anymore. They used to be called America Got Talent. I don't know how they're called now. But I think that goes in detriment to the cultural art, to the music. At the end, it damages it, you know?
Well, Pablo, you just summarized the argument for why we need to support music education in the schools, in the community. This is why. This is why, to get students enthusiastic about who they are, where they come from, about learning, and to have people outside of the culture understand the culture better, and to have these greater connections. This has been so terrific, and I have had so much fun. I'm hoping that everybody who is listening in the audience can now give Cynthia and Pablo a thumbs up. And thank you so much for participating with us in this program.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
All right. Thank you, Marc. This has been a fantastic program. Nope, turn my video on. There we go. This has been great. And it's a good thing my camera was off, because you don't see me dancing in my chair the whole time, because I have certainly enjoyed listening to this. Those of you who are participating through the Cambio conference, please make sure to complete your evaluation form. Hang on here. There we go. My screens are playing a little game with me here. We want to thank our presenters today for providing such a rich and entertaining program to kick off this series that celebrates the contributions of Latinx people to the great state of Missouri during this bicentennial year. So thank you to Pablo Sanhueza and the musicians of the Kansas City Latin Jazz Orchestra. Count me now as your biggest fan. And to Marc Rice. Marc, you did a great job. Marc is a professor of musicology at Truman State University. And Cynthia Ammerman. Cynthia came on there for a little bit, and she's been answering your questions in the Q&A. She's the executive director of the Kansas City Latin Jazz Orchestra, and she's also the director of the Nevada, that's in Missouri, the Nevada Preservation Foundation in Las Vegas, and she has some other hats she wears as well. We also want to thank our official sponsor for this series, Latinx Communities in Missouri, that is LIUNA, the Missouri and Kansas Laborers District Council. We really appreciate their support. This event was also sponsored by the Missouri Arts Council, the Missouri Folk Arts Program, the MU Museum of Art and Archaeology, the Alianzas program at UMKC, of course, the Cambio Center at MU Extension, that's me, and Lisa, and the National Endowments for the Arts. So our next event in this series in July will be about the economic contributions of Latinx communities in Missouri. It will also be free and online, and it will be held Wednesday, July 14th at 2 o'clock. So we'll have members from the St. Louis, Kansas City, and the Branson Hispanic Chambers of Commerce that are going to talk about the impacts Latinx people are having on Missouri's economy, on the workforce, and what the future looks like in terms of the impacts of Latinx communities in Missouri. So this and future events, this one today did not require registration. The future ones will, although it will be free. We just need to be able to monitor those numbers. So please watch your email or check for a Facebook event. The event isn't posted on Facebook today, but it will be by tomorrow. So check your events in Facebook. So thank you all for coming today. Unless there's any final comments or questions from our panelists, that will wrap it up. And I'm going to go find some more videos on YouTube, Pablo, so I can continue my own little dance party going.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the conference.
Thank you. I see you soon.